Thank you so much for joining me. This is Cascade's Q3 Conservation Advisory Group meeting. Please know that I've started a recording and a transcription, and Des enough to taking notes during our meeting as well. I'm going to go on video here temporarily. We'll see if my internet gets really please let me know and I can turn my video off. Go through presentation. Probably won't be on video the whole time anyway, but struggling with it today. So you should have a copy of our agenda, and you should also have, you should be seeing the Conservation Advisory Group slides. Know if you need either email to you, you should have a copy in your meeting invite, so to send to you separately if need be. So, that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and let's see. You are to see my slides, right? Continue.
I think having the video on while you're speaking is making the fidelity worse. But I don't know.
Are you able to see the slides?
Oh, yes. Yes, I can see the slides.
Okay. Thank you, Sheila. I will go ahead and turn the video off and we'll give it a try. Yeah, I'm sorry. I did everything I could about the internet. I will, please do know if it's possible, and I will stop and regroup, try again here. So first thing on our agenda is going to be a safety moment. With it being summer, it's really important to keep in mind all those tips. We've got a few of them loaded here for you. Obviously, by a boat, a boat launch, and be really cautious of the around boats. Wear a vest through the U.S. Coast Guard. Make sure there's a kids if anybody's swimming. Keep things away from tripping hazards around the pool if you're in a pool. Wear that bike helmet if you're out. Make sure that you're observing lots of riding and just being cautious. Drive decent on a bike as you would offensively. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure if it's just me or if everybody else. It's really getting choppy, I think.
Yeah, her audio is not good at all.
Okay, so I'm gonna need my default. I'm gonna try to connect. Okay, can I ask how my quality is now?
I would say no. I didn't really catch what you said.
No, it's still not good.
Monica, do you think it would make sense to have Des run the slideshow and then have you call in on your phone, maybe?
All right, you can do that. Thank you, Justin, Lori.
Des, are you running the slides right now?
I'm not right now, but let me get to our agenda and open that.
Are you back on, Monica?
So I do have it pulled up, so which gets back on. I'll share the screen.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, that's much better.
Much better.
All right, I'm on the phone.
Okay, Monica,
Thank you so much for your patience.
I have the slides up.
I think I'm okay with the slides right now, though, Des. So
okay.
My preference would be to I'll try to keep sharing the slides. I'll let you know if I need you to take over.
Sounds good.
On the slide deck in the meantime, but thank you so much for that offer.
You're welcome.
All right. So I really apologize. But anyway, I can keep saying that. But I thought I had worked this out. Apparently not. So I'll continue. So summer safety tips. I'm not sure how much of it you heard before, but you can see it in front of you. I will scooch on to the next one here. We've got fire safety tips as well. A lot of camping. We have outdoor fires, we've got fireworks, we've got barbecues, just making sure that you're being cognizant of what the impact is to those around you. Keeping fire pits and barbecues away from flammables. Obviously, we're past the 4th of July, so hopefully that's not a concern anymore. But just general tips to follow. So All right, I'm gonna move on from there. And before we get into our commercial program and everything, what I would like to actually do is do a brief roll call. See who's actually on the phone today. Obviously, Monica Collishaw. Again, I apologize for the rough start this morning, but I manage our energy efficiency and community outreach program for Cascade. And then I think because I am running a little bit behind, maybe we'll just go through alphabetically, really brief little introduction if people are able. I think, Amy, I think you're the first one on here.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Amy Wheeler. I'm with the Northwest Energy Coalition, based in Seattle, working on energy efficiency policy. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Amy. Des, if you'd be kind enough.
Yes, I am Desiree Bickmore, and I'm the Conservation Support Specialist for the Energy Efficiency Department in Bellingham.
Thanks, Des. Lori.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Lori Blattner, the Director of Regulatory Affairs and Energy Efficiency for Cascade. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Lori. Mark.
Mark Childs with Cascade Natural Gas, Regulatory and Customer Service.
Thanks, Mark. Corey. Okay, maybe we'll circle back around to Corey. I'm not sure if I think you're still muted, Corey, if you're trying to talk. Okay. Ashton, let's move down.
Hey everyone, Ashton Michael Davis, economist with Cascade.
Good morning, Ashton. Brady, if you'd be kind enough.
Brady Day with TRC. We manage the Commercial Industrial Energy Efficiency Program for Cascade.
Thanks, Brady. Gil, are you there? Gil Peach, are you available to introduce yourself? Okay, go ahead and move on. Pardeep.
Good morning, team. My name is Pradeep Kaur, and I'm working as a rebate processor at Cascade Natural Gas Bellingham.
Great, thank you, Pardeep. And Ted.
Ted McCammett, Manager Energy Services, Cascade.
Good morning, Ted. And Sheila.
Sheila McElhinney, Senior Analyst, Cascade Natural Gas, Energy Efficiency.
Thank you, Sheila. Devin.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Devin McGreal, Senior Resource Planning Economist with Cascade.
Good morning. Taylor.
Good morning. My name is Taylor Mead, and I'm a support specialist for Cascade.
Thanks, Taylor. Heather.
Good morning. Heather Moline with Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission.
Thanks, Heather. Jocelyn.
Good morning. My name is Jocelyn Moore, and I am a energy efficiency support specialist with Cascade Natural Gas.
Thank you. Mike? Mike, are you there? Okay. Mike Parvinen is a regulatory manager for Cascade Natural Gas. Peter, would you be kind enough?
Hi, yeah, good morning. Peter Crystalite with NIA. I'm the gas portfolio manager.
Thank you, Peter. And Stephanie?
Good morning. Conservation Support Specialist for Energy Efficiency in Bellingham.
Thanks, Stephanie. And Liz?
Hey folks, Liz Reichart, Department of Commerce, Senior Energy Policy Specialist focused on buildings and energy efficiency. Great to be here.
Thank you, Liz. Caleb?
Yeah, good morning. I'm Caleb Reimer. I'm the Economic Analyst for Cascade.
Thank you, Caleb. I think this is probably your first meeting with the group here, so we're very excited to have you on board.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Brian?
Hey everyone, this is Brian Robertson, Supervisor of Resource Planning with Cascade.
Good morning. And Ross, if you'd be so kind.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. I'm Ross Quigley. I work with Opportunity Council as the Director for Weatherization and Building Performance Center in my normal job, and I am attending today as the temporary representative of the Energy Project because Sean Collins moved on to other things. So I'm the acting director for the Energy Project for the time being.
Thank you for joining us, Arash. Greatly appreciated. Mark Sellers-Vaughn.
Good morning. I'm Mark Sellers-Vaughn, Manager of Supply Resource Planning with Cascade.
Thanks, Mark. And John.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well. My name is John Storvik. I'm an energy efficiency analyst with Cascade Natural Gas.
Perfect. Thank you, John. So one of the first items I was going to note was that Sean Collins has actually moved on. As you mentioned, Ross, we greatly appreciate you joining us for this meeting, and then would be happy to circle back around if you have any questions afterwards. Just support whatever you need as far as representing the energy project in the interim on our advisory group. So thank you for joining us. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to just briefly go over our notes from the last Conservation Advisory Group meeting. As you all know, hopefully you should be able to see this as well. This is just our website. I have our, this is the location where we keep the transcript, no, excuse me, not transcription, but the video of our meetings. And then we have our Q2 notes here as well. So we started off last, I think it was in April, wasn't it? Yeah, April 20th. We kind of went through our remaining action items as we always do. We went over, let's see here, the commercial highlights, residential highlights as well. Just talking about how the program had done from the previous year. We did turn in our annual report on June 1st, I think, is when we actually got it filed with the commission, but we gave a little bit of previews as to what we were seeing for the end of the year accomplishments for Cascade. That's the residential highlights. Obviously, we did our low income weatherization update. Sheila helped me with that since Alan is no longer working with this department within Cascade. We went over a couple of the just general updates from Q1, project count, that kind of thing for the low income side. We also talked about our tariff update that went into effect in April. So that's been really good to see those actual applications coming in for the new tariff amounts. That's been exciting to see the customers getting the rebates for those. We also had a non-energy impacts discussion led by Carrie, just kind of a precursor to what we think will be additional conversations later this year, talking about those non-energy impacts and how they're accounted for in our programs. And there's the information we talked about with the annual report. We had our preliminary draft numbers. And then we talked about the builder engagement with John, kind of went over what we saw from the previous year, the impacts from the code change and just how it was affecting our programs as a whole. We did an IRP update as well, and then talked about the quarterly cadence for our programs. So a couple of the action items that were on here, I'm going to address here in just a minute on our agenda, so I can kind of click off of the notes and back to look back at my agenda. Are there any questions before I go to the action items about what we talked about during our last quarterly meeting? Okay, so as you can see, I did try to change up our format here a little bit. Everybody does have a copy of the agenda. I didn't want to just share the agenda as we were going through the conversation. It's not very dynamic, so you can have it on the back end. If you have any questions as we go through the agenda, please let me know. I'm not planning on actually sharing it unless anyone has a specific question, and then I can do that. I will say the action items that we were talking about at the time, let's see here. We have the business case on food service, the food service sector that Gil had brought up, talking about fryers and whether we were actually going to continue to offer them in our programs. They actually have been removed from our commercial industrial program due to code changes. And there's been a question that's come up, and we'll talk about that actually again a little bit later in this agenda. I think Brady's got a little bit of conversation about that. So we'll touch base on that again now, but that was an action item from our last meeting. And then we talked about the subgroup for the low income program, discussions for the advisory group here. We're still planning on doing that. It's on hold right now, but definitely on our to-do list. and likely Ross had something that Sean wanted to be engaged in. But if we get that subgroup up and running, then we'll make sure that you or your the final director is included in those conversations. And then we'd had conversations with the WTC about avoided costs and incorporation into our energy efficiency potential through the IRP. And we'll talk about that here as well. And the other to-do question that we had was to make sure as we transition from all remote meetings to either hybrid or in person, that experience for the people both in the room and audio or through remote is the same, equal access, let's say. I didn't start off this meeting all that great from that perspective, but having said that, we actually do have technology now. When we go into the actual in-person and hybrid for external, we have technology that'll have a video camera, and that video camera actually is able to zoom in on different participants who are talking. The audio is much better. It actually has a really good microphone. We've been testing it the last couple of days. We'll make sure that for our Q4 meeting, it is available, tested, working, but I wanted to let you know that we did take that action item. We moved forward with it. We have the technology. We're going to practice with it ahead of time and then make sure that's available for our next meeting when we are actually able to meet in person. Really excited to share that with everybody. So those are the action items from our last meeting. Do we have any questions, comments from the team? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. I do see a note that Corey is available now. Corey, do you want to maybe introduce yourself? Okay, I think I just set Corey up. Corey is available, so he had to step away for a moment, but he is available representing Public Counsel on our call today. And then I think Mark Thompson, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning. Thank you. Yes, good to be here. I'm Mark Thompson with Forefront Economics. We've done a number of projects for Cascade, most recently an analysis of low income rate design with Gil Peach and Associates. So good to be here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it, Mark.
Absolutely.
I'm not hearing any questions about the action items from the last one or our follow-up, so I'm just going to move on to our next agenda item here, and that's our quarterly portfolio update. So Brady, would you be kind enough to address the commercial side for me, please?
Yes, good morning, everyone. So through Q2, the program on the commercial side has continued to be slow. This was anticipated pretty early in the year that Q1 and Q2 would be slow. They were a little slower than we expected. To date, the program has achieved 71,374 therms, or about 17% of the overall yearly goal of 419,461 therms. I have that number memorized, so I think I did that right. It's about 35% of where we expected to be through Q2 when we set out the quarterly goals. The goal for through Q2 was about 203,000 therms, so pretty far behind. That said, we have a lot of positive momentum. I'll talk a little bit about why we're a little slower than we anticipated, but also kind of a plan to get back on track. So we have been, a lot of the projects that we identified early or expected to close early in the year were pushed due to supply chain issues. Largely supply chain issues, not exclusively, but largely because of that. And so we've gotten a little more certainty on when those dates will actually, those projects will actually complete and the dates associated with those. So we do anticipate a very robust Q3 and Q4. And we've already started that actually with a submission on the agenda. You'll see Q3 that it mentions in the fourth bullet that there are about 46,000 therms are expected to close in July. We actually, based on when this data went in or information went in and where we're at now, we do anticipate that being closer to 55,000 therms that will close in July. which is more than either Q1 or Q2. So it's kind of a sign of what we expected. Nobody wants to get off to a slower start and not deliver those projects for customers consistently throughout the year, but a fair bit of it was out of our control. So we have a lot of, in addition to the 55,000 therms that we anticipate to close in July, we've also identified an additional about 345,000 therms. It says 361 here, but some of that was projects that actually completed and completed that are part of the 55,000 and so on. Anyway, we have an additional 345,000 therms that we've identified as likely to complete in Q3 and Q4. So assuming all of those projects close, of course, we will achieve the yearly goal. There's obviously some risk to that, not just in supply chain issues, but just in processing times and things like that. So we're going to continue to monitor that and provide our monthly update to Cascade, as well as obviously a quarterly update at the end of Q3. So any questions specifically on the numbers or any questions about projects completed or in some cases not completed?
Brady, I was just going to make a note on the agenda. There's a slight typo where it's the same table that we have noted here, but on the agenda we actually had it say Q1 total, and that's inaccurate. The PowerPoint is accurate, where it says this is the Q2 total, Q2 total. So I just wanted to make that clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, and on the agenda the numbers are correct. It's just the Q1. It's not Q1. That is the Q2 total. So thank you. Great. So in addition to the projects that we've added that we have identified for closure in Q3 and Q4, we have made one change, and then kind of to go back to an additional agenda item from Q2, we'll talk about the fryers. Based on cost effectiveness and based on the therms achieved, we have made one slight adjustment to the program, and that is for high efficiency condensing boilers, and that's lowering the minimum input from 300 kBTU to 199 kBTU through our technical manager or engineer. Basically doing the calculations, we determined that these 199 and above now should qualify for the prescriptive measure. So we are making that change and doing that moving forward for those condensing boilers. Are there any questions on that? Monica, I don't know if you want to chime in at all on that. But
yeah, sorry, Brady. I was just going to say one thing to clarify on that is we did confirm with our model and that load map did not take that specific size into account when looking at the efficiencies, so it does not affect the savings potential as determined through the forecasting model.
Good point. And then, and this is something that has come up with other energy efficiency programs around the state when it comes to the fryers and the food service equipment and the code changes. Gil had brought up the important point that it's really a matter of what the market is doing and what the market is expressing, as opposed to necessarily what code changes are, or that should be at least considered as a factor. So I have spoken with several of our food service vendors that we do regular work with. I've also spoken with other programs around the state, and the market continues to be driven by non-code meeting. I can't think of the right word, but by fryers, essentially fryers that are not Energy Star. And based on code, any fryers manufactured after January 1st, 2021 were, I don't want to say required, but expected to be Energy Star. And when you literally physically go into the market, go into the stores and talk with the folks in the market, they're still offering below code fryers. So that's been something that's been discussed again with other programs, and I believe Heather has been a part of those discussions. Both Monica and I have chimed in with this information. I'm not sure where it goes from here, but I can just chime in and say that I concur that the market is not transforming to Energy Star at this point. And so how that's handled from an incentive perspective and what we can continue to offer moving forward, I think is still a little bit up in the air. Monica, do you want to chime in or add anything to that?
Sure. Just to clarify that we currently, as a reminder, are not offering the fryers because of that code change. Perhaps Heather, is there anything that you'd like to add from the commission's perspective on any conversations that are being had at the regional level?
Yeah, I'm happy to offer staff perspective. I think the direction we ended up giving Puget Sound Energy, which was the original utility that kind of came to us with, we don't think we should keep offering only above code stuff because that's just not what's being bought and that's not what people can afford. I think the direction we gave them, and I'm searching for the email that their energy efficiency point person sent to them and CC'd me on, was something like, give us data showing that this is more than anecdotal, like, what percent of sales or what percent of distribution is below code. So like tell us a story with data to show that this is the reality, and we will definitely present this as sort of a reasonable approach to the commissioners. And I know that in California, I'm not sure if there are folks on this call that are more familiar with this than I am, but there was actually a law that passed saying, okay, utilities are allowed to offer below code equipment given the times. So this is definitely a thing that, reality is reality, and depending on the kind of information and how concise and clear the information is, we think could make sense depending on the service territory.
Thank you, Heather. Yeah, that's good information. And I most of my information is anecdotal. I don't have any specific numbers, and I think there's a little bit of a chilling effect that they might not want to share numbers because technically they're a little below code. So, or not a little, they're below code. So I'm not sure if that information is going to be forthcoming. I'd be happy to reach out and see if there's anything specific I can get in terms of, just using fryers as the example, because it was a big driver in our program. And certainly there were other food service measures that dropped off, but the one that was, by far the most impactful for us. So Corey, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering if, sort of piggybacking on Heather's comment, is there any way to get some sort of data around current market saturation of at code, which I guess you might run into the same problem of people not being forthcoming if they're not at code. But if that's a significant enough number, incentives to switch could work. And also wondering if there is any sort of feasibility with increasing the incentives offered for above code measures, in addition to looking at the feasibility of at code.
Yeah, so we did explore the idea of, so Energy Star is essentially code for fryers now. We did look at fryers that are above Energy Star, so not just Energy Star, but there's kind of a concept of Energy Star 2 or Energy Star 3, and the delta and the savings associated with those fryers, at least what's currently available. It's not really even in the market. In other words, it's not really in the stores, but they are out there in, somewhere in the market. But the savings associated and the cost differential made it not viable to offer an incentive for based on cost effectiveness reasons, because the cost is significantly more. I don't have the data on that, but I know that we did do an analysis of that when we first became aware of the code changes. That said, that's something that down the road I think could be, as costs come down a little bit and potentially energy savings increase, that is something that we could consider in the future.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. Gil, is there anything you'd want to add based on? I know you were having some mic issues earlier, but is there anything you would want to add based on the conversation we had 3 months ago, and maybe based on the information that you've heard today? Take that as a no, or you're still having mic issues. So, any other questions around that point? Great. So the next area that on the commercial industrial side, and I'm going to try to make this quick, but we've done some different types of outreach campaigns through our marketing or outreaching to customers. We have completed the first of our 2 different 2-month campaigns on audio streaming, and have had really good feedback from the vendor that we're using, who Cascade also used on the residential side for a video streaming campaign last year. The listen through rate of more than 94% for both English and Spanish ads on the audio streaming campaign. Again, slightly higher, as it notes in the agenda, slightly higher than the industry average of 93%, but really good and really positive feedback. So it's kind of our first foray into a new way of reaching out to customers, both in terms of it being a streaming campaign. So, think your Pandoras and Spotify's and podcasts and things like that, but also in terms of doing both an English and a Spanish language version. So,
And Brady?
Yeah.
Jocelyn's going to share that audio right now.
Oh, great.
Step into the future with the Cascade Natural Gas Commercial and Industrial Incentive Program. Cascade now offers incentives for installing efficient hot water or food service equipment. And upgrading your building by adding insulation gives you even more benefits. For a limited time, when a business completes installation of efficient natural gas radiant heating and also installs insulation, Cascade will pay an additional 10% in cash incentives. For more info, visit cngc.com/energy efficiency.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
Yeah. So kind of the idea is an awareness campaign, but also focused on one of our bigger initiatives in 2022, and that is bundling Radiant with insulation incentives, as that will significantly bring down energy costs for the customer, save therms, and so on. So any other questions on outreach? Great. I don't have anything additional to add. There are some more charts in the agenda for projections and future and what's been identified. And just to go back, just as there might be a little bit of confusion when we say that we've identified, essentially 83% or 86% of overall goal. That does not mean we're accounting for all those projects which we have already have vision to, because we only account for a certain percentage of those because we don't anticipate that 100% will close. If right now, again, 100% of those projects close with what we've already submitted and what we've already achieved, we'll be somewhere around 113% of goal. But we do, I don't want to say downplay, but limit the number of therms that we expect to achieve from those projects, because we do know that some will either be pushed or delayed or outright canceled. But we also do make up a little bit for that in projects that we know we haven't quite identified yet, but we'll get there. So I think that is all for me on the commercial side. I'll be back later to talk about, I'll be on the whole call, but I'll be back later to talk about SEM. And if there's any other questions that come up, we can possibly address those at that time. So thank you all.
Thanks, Brady. There was a response from Gil in the chat.
Yeah, saw that.
I'm not sure you saw it. Okay, great.
I did. Very well said.
And any questions from other CAG members on the commercial update right now? All right, I'm going to move on to the residential update.
The Cascade Natural Gas Commercial and Industrial Incentive Program. Cascade now offers incentives for installing efficient hot water.
So good, we had to hear it twice.
I had to hear it twice, and I didn't think it was going to work on my end, so go figure, right? All right, so we've got our residential highlights here. Jocelyn has taken on the role of putting these together for me. I really appreciate that she does that. It helps with the, just helps to make it more concise and just really clear on where we're going and what trends we're seeing, and where the opportunities are to maybe improve some of our messaging or just to reach out more to our customers. So you'll see right now for the residential program, well, I say right now, it's through June, we've reached 42% of our goal. To reach our mid-cycle goal, we have a couple of action items that we're doing. One of those things is, increasing our in-person outreach, issuing additional bonus coupons, backfilling a role that was vacated in May, I believe, and that was our outreach conservation analyst role. And then we also are working on some streaming video campaigns as well on the residential front. Whereas the commercial industrial program was doing the radio ad, on the residential front, we're doing a video, and that should be out during the heating season, where we should actually have a draft of that in the next couple of weeks. So you'll see the numbers here, the residential program. Let's see, Q2, we've got 76,000 therms, compared to our Q2 3-year average, which is 109,000 therms. Our goal is that 429,000 therms. We're on track for it. There are a couple of opportunities, as I mentioned, for us to maybe get a little more interest from the customers, at least get more of those applications to be submitted. And that's where we're really focusing for the latter half of this year, is to see where we can increase that interest from the customers. We did pay about 793 rebates in this last quarter, which is, gives us that 178,000 therms for the year so far. We also did an update to our public user experience portal in January. It wasn't just an update, it was actually, we transitioned to the public user experience versus a public user interface. So it's a completely different format for that residential program application online. And we are seeing much higher rates of application submittal online. So that's been a positive reinforcement for that change that we put into place, which is, the easier it is for those customers to actually apply for the rebates, hopefully the more likely they are to follow through with that process, and then help us actually, recognize those savings that are being put into place. The residential team actually received 831 applications, which is higher than our 3-year average for Q2, but still opportunity for more, right? If we're going to continue to meet the higher and higher goals that we're seeing for the years as our programs progress, then we do need to make sure that we're getting more of those applications in to be able to meet those goal requirements. As I mentioned, we've looked at a couple of those items to increase our uptake. One of the things that I'd like to kind of focus on is this brainstorming session that our internal team did. I want to say it was in May, I think, a couple months ago. So we actually brought our entire energy efficiency team together, sat down and went through this process. Carrie's not available right now, and she really is the lead on these processes. Her quality management system, one of the aspects of that is these different tools that we have to not just do brainstorming, but to sit down, really synthesize what the issue is, and then what is our question? What are we trying to answer? What are the contributing factors? And then how are we going to address that moving forward? And so this was that process that we did in place. We put in place in our in-person meeting in May. So the first thing was an issue call fish diagram, and that diagram was intended to identify the problems and the contributing factors to the main problem that we're seeing for our program. The second is to engage in a brainstorming session on how are we going to address, how do we address that problem that was identified through those contributing factors. The next step is to synthesize the feedback that we received through an affinity matrix, and then to identify of that feedback, what are the priorities, what are the things we really want to focus on moving forward. And then after that, we circle back around, review what those priorities are through that lens of the Ishikawa diagram. So what were the problems that we identified, or of those, the problem that was identified, what were those contributing factors and how are we addressing each of those based on the priorities? So I wanted to show you an example of our diagram. I realize that it's fairly small and there's some acronyms here that might not be as relevant for an outside party, but I wanted to give you an idea of some of the things that we're looking at. So on this diagram, you'll see like ESR is energy services rep. So this is things that we think that we can partner more with Ted's team, and Ted's on the call here with us. We also look at TA meaning trade ally. So these are the different areas that we identified as contributing factors to our problem. And our problem is we're not getting enough residential rebate applications. We need to get more residential rebate applications to meet that mid-cycle goal. And to bring those in, right now, what are we seeing that's actually affecting that Q level? What is keeping us from getting more of those applications in? And so the different elements that we looked at were within the environment, interactions with people, equipment that we have, the process itself, the materials that we have, and then management as well. So what are the contributing factors? I will probably, obviously you can see that there's a little gap there for management, and I don't know if that's because I was in the room when we did the exercise. So, but it is also, we're looking more external factors versus just internally, but certainly more opportunity to review this further as we look at our next steps and what are we going to do to address this problem and potential opportunities for increasing our rebates. You can see some of the things that we identified here, from the environmental perspective, or in the environment side, are we only being reactive versus proactive? Is there more opportunity for buy-in and partnership with the energy services reps within the organization? When we're looking at our customer base, is it a lack of awareness that they're not, using these rebates, or at least applying for the rebates through the application process? Is it our relationships from Cascade as a whole with the trade allies that we could really improve those relationships? Is it new trade allies bringing in rebates, really getting more of those trade allies, or more contractors into our trade ally program so they're aware of them? Is it focusing more on a great customer service experience and a better rebate turnaround time? Again, energy services reps, as far as people, we're working with those energy services reps. So how can we support them in the goal of customers putting in these higher efficiency equipment when they do? Is it more in-person outreach? So maybe we can do more team volunteer projects so that we have, more visibility at the level with the customers when they're actually out there doing these different activities. How do we make that difference in the community? Maybe it's just more education for our trade allies. So when we went through this process, it was just kind of shoot out the ideas. We weren't knocking anybody down. We weren't doing anything like that. We just really needed to see, honest view. What do we think some of these contributing factors are? Maybe we need more online resources for our customers. Maybe we need a digital bill banner, more digital ads, because everything's transitioning to a digital kind of environment. Again, for the process, maybe it's a better TA education for the partnership. Maybe we do better team training. We touch base more with the trade allies. Maybe our paper applications are confusing and submission needs to be better. Maybe we just need to improve that TA partnership. Maybe we need better staff talking points, all these different things, public awareness at the time they're making the decisions, informed decision making. From the equipment side, we need to partner with those manufacturers. So these are some of the main things that we really identified. And from this, we've taken and done that affinity matrix, and we're looking at the areas where we think we can kind of focus those next steps to bringing in the additional rebates and customer awareness in general. stay tuned on our next steps. But I wanted you to kind of get an idea of some of the processes that we're currently doing. Yeah, so anyway, any questions about our current process? We actually have another in-person meeting planned for next week, and that's where we're gonna continue with that affinity matrix now and really walk through those priorities and what we think our next steps are based on that. Okay. Again, credit to Carrie. She leads these conversations and put the Ishikawa fish diagram together and really helps us kind of walk through that quality management process on how do we improve. It's a constant evolution of our program. So it's really valuable to have these types of insights. And I appreciate our team for their willingness to sit down and just kind of scratch our heads and say, okay, what do we do next? What can we do? How do we improve? How do we adaptively manage? Essentially, that's one of the things that we've been tasked with through the commission and really through our biennial conservation plan and trying to seek all possible conservation. This is one of those steps that we're taking to make sure that we're taking a real world look, real time look, I should say, more than real world, at our programs and really evaluating them internally. And it was fun, I'll say that. So it's always nice to have fun at your job, right? All right, so I'm going to move on then if there's no questions. So from the residential side, we also have some additional outreach we're going to be doing in the next, couple of months. As I mentioned, we're bringing on a new outreach analyst, which will be very nice because they'll be able to be out there in person, having those conversations with customers again. We just in June actually did our first in-person tabling event that we had done for a couple of years. It was really nice to be able to get out there. Kudos to Stephanie. She went out for us, had those conversations with the customers, was able to set up our table again, get out there and really talk to the customers. And we're excited to be able to do that again. As I mentioned, we're going to be doing a streaming campaign for a commercial for the residential front. And this is going to be focusing on trade allies and throughout our territory. So that'll be fun. I'll share that with you during our next quarterly advisory meeting. We'll be able to actually play that commercial for you. And then, of course, we're continuing our energy efficiency advertising in regional publications, and that includes, this is around the time when we start doing the home tour ads, and obviously our bill inserts, and there's the fairs, and so we're actually placing some ads in the directories and that kind of thing. So that'll be for next quarter. For last quarter, we're looking at some of the outreach here that Taylor was kind enough to develop for us. And you've got the bill insert on the left, really fun talking about our new offerings. That's really a great discussion topic with our customer base and our trade allies. There's some increased rebates here for the furnaces. There's 2 tiers now, whereas we used to just have the one, and the dollar amount went up as well. And the clothes washer, I don't think we've seen a ton of clothes washers come through yet, but this is the first time we've had a clothes washer rebate for the residential program, I want to say since 2010. So it's nice to be able to have that offering. And the increased Energy Star smart thermostat rebate. Our programmable thermostat rebate is 25, this is 75. So we're seeing some uptake on that as well. And Windows have a lot of interest as well. So we're focusing some of our message there. So pretty fun. Yeah. Just gonna see anything else on here. As I mentioned, 42% of goal. I'm still plugging away. Any questions from the actual agenda itself, or questions on what I've talked about as far as the brainstorming, outreach, current queue levels, anything like that?
Yeah, this is Heather, UTC. Can you go back to the cool looking fish?
Yeah.
I'm curious whether, let's see. So lack of awareness, that's pretty standard. I mean, like an industry best practice in the country is people just don't know that things are available. So I'm glad that you all put that on there. I'm wondering about like who has engaged in energy efficiency in the past and whether anyone brought up Are there groups of people or certain kinds of customers or customer segments within residential that we just do not have relationships with? Like, I'm not seeing a lot here about, lack of awareness in general is one thing, but lack of awareness and or partnership and or outreach in certain areas, et cetera. And I know you all have made efforts in certain areas in the past, so I'm just wondering whether that came up.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So targeted, which sectors really don't know about our programs? Where's that opportunity? I don't recall in this specific conversation if that came up, and maybe one of my team members, if they remember, I'd love to hear. Jocelyn, do you have a thought?
Hi, good morning. When we were working on this brainstorming session, it was much more of a zoomed out view rather than getting into the specifics. This is really meant more as a launching off point and to give us a direction to go in. So observations like this are really, really valuable for us to when we come back and refocus on the specifics from this. Because at the time we weren't looking that closely. We were trying to go from a grander scale.
That's a really good point, Jocelyn, because that's our next step, right? Is we're looking at that affinity matrix. We're looking at where we can actually take next steps and what those priorities are. And I think that's where, kind of your question can lead us, Heather, is, what we know lack of awareness. We know that's kind of a consistent issue. And so what of that lack of awareness, where can we target our efforts? What can we look at next? And one thing we have been working on, and we've mentioned this, and I think you said this as well, at least and actually Brady kind of mentioned it too, is the Spanish speaking customer base. As we're trying to make sure that we have, the applications and the incentive sheets are as readily available for them as they are in English. We're also doing some of our advertising in Spanish, so we've got the radio streaming ad. That one was created in Spanish as well, and then we've also got some of our advertising that we're doing right now at the baseball stadiums, where we we have billboards, not billboards, I guess they're like 3x4 concourse signs is what they're called. And we'll do those in Spanish as well, so that we have both the English and the Spanish version. But that's not the only sector, right? There's a lot of other customer segments that may just not be aware of our program offerings. So we're trying to identify these opportunities, and I think you're right, Heather. I think that's probably the next step, is as we look at lack of awareness, and where is that happening, and how do we identify it, and what's the next step? So any recommendations you have as far as identifying that would be greatly appreciated as we look at our next steps.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm looking for intel from folks who work directly with customers at Cascade and who work directly in outreach. It might be hard to run like a study on what are some of the characteristics of people who do tend to come through our doors or apply, and to find any patterns. That might be hard, but even anecdotally, I wonder if that's sort of a next step that you can ask outreach reps is, let's keep this question in mind, is like, who tends to show up? Who do we tend to work with? And sometimes we're not as good at recognizing that ourselves. Like it has to be someone else pointing it out, someone who's like not in the know of the industry. So yeah, I guess this is me just hoping that there's space created for questions like that somehow.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think one of the areas that we're looking at is, bringing this outreach analyst on board and having them identify some of that gap. We've been doing this okay, I'm going to say I've been doing this for long enough that I kind of keep hearing the same things, and I also tend to fall back on what I'm comfortable with, and I'm trying really hard to step out of that and saying, and what are we missing? I can't identify it because I just kind of keep falling back on what I've done before. So where is that new information coming in? Where are these new ideas coming in, and how can we leverage that? And I think that we're really going to depend on this new analyst to be out there talking to those folks, saying, okay, so do you know about us? If you don't, where can we meet at your level? Wherever you're at, where can we be there as well and have these conversations? And as I think Sheila just kind of noted it in the chat is those trade allies. We're really looking at partnering even more. I keep saying partnering, and I know that I sound like a broken record. So how do we engage with those trade allies? They're the ones in the homes talking to the customers. So what are they seeing? Where do they, how are customers hearing about their services, and how do we make sure that energy efficiency is the prime conversation as we go into these different opportunities? So
one last thing, and then I'll put my hand down. Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the notes I put in chat end up in the notes for the meeting. I mean, for 30 years now, not that we've done a great job of it, but the UTC has been thinking about, just like all of us, how we get to renters. And this is sort of a working list of strategies to get better at reaching rental customers. So for your consideration.
Yeah, great. I will take the stuff in the chat. If we could take that as a to-do for me, Des, I'd love to read through what Heather's noted in the chat here for working with best practices for working with renters. I will say Cascade's actually partnered with Western Washington University's energy program in the past. We've had a couple of students who focused on how do we give renters information about energy efficiency? How do we target those renters, and then how do we actually get the landlords to find it beneficial to put in these upgrades to help those renters? And so we've talked about data release policies and data usage and that kind of thing with these students, trying to help them with their different studies on that process. And there's a lot more that can be done there. So absolutely, we are committed to helping with it. We'll look through your information and see if there's more that we can do on that front. And of course, there's always the partnering with the low income, making sure that they have equal access to energy efficiency opportunities as well. And I know that there's a lot more that needs to be done from that energy equity perspective, and we'll continue to work on that as well. And any other questions, comments on that part? It was a great conversation, Heather. Thank you for bringing that up. Like I said, it was really valuable to do this and actually sit down. It's great to have everybody in person, right, with having been in remote stage for the last 2.5 years. But to really to look at your program and break it down to these different elements and see, what's next, what can we do now? So that was, I'm excited to see what our next process looks like. Okay, so I do want to offer up a break. If it's okay with the group here, I'd like to do the low income discussion first, and then we can break for about 10 minutes if that works, unless anyone needs a break immediately. So Sheila, I'll ask you to go ahead and help me with this part, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. All right, so we are covering, this chart shows all of Q1 and Q2 in terms of accomplishments. So we had a trend going in Q2 that was pretty steep, and we're not maintaining that aggressive trend at this time. We've only paid out 4 additional homes during Q2 over what we worked on during Q1, but we still have lots of projects coming in. So I would say slow and steady wins the race. Lots of supply chain issues. Insulation is really hard to get. It's super expensive. Nobody wants to stick around and work anywhere. I'll be scheduling an all-agency meeting during Q3 as sort of an aside, or maybe not, I'll be attending Energy Out West, which is the premier national weatherization conference. It isn't just focused on low income, but building science in general. So hopefully I'll have some things to bring back from there. Emerging technologies, something new. And we updated the low income Whippy Whip tariff on April 1st, and all of our MRUs are updated. There you have it. Do you have any questions for me about the low income weatherization program here at Cascade? All righty then. Hearing nothing.
Thanks, Sheila.
Take it away, Monica.
All right. Yeah, as Sheila mentioned, we haven't seen as many applications submitted by the agencies this quarter as we did last quarter. So hopefully we'll see a little bit more. Sheila's identified a couple of those areas where we think that are affecting. That's the supply chain and potentially the labor shortages as well. And these are things that those agencies brought up to us during our, I think it was Q1 meeting, wasn't it, Sheila? When we had that, was it March? I'm trying to remember.
Yes, it was Q1, and we still have a fair amount of attrition and people leaving, staff changes at all different kinds of levels. So there's some churning, and it can make it a little slower, but I'll be sure to reach out and develop relationships with anyone who's new on the weatherization side of our agencies to make friends.
There has been a lot of transition on their front, and I think there is a to-do here for you in the chat as well, Sheila. Heather's asked if it's possible for her to be a kind of a fly on the wall for that all agency meeting.
I don't see a problem with that at all. It would be wonderful to have you, Heather. So I'll keep you posted on that. I'll send you an invite when I have the day and time nailed down.
Great, thank you, Sheila. Thanks, Heather. Okay. Any questions, comments? Ross, anything you like? Any questions you might have for us on the low income program status right now?
Well, I guess I'm curious about what kind of visibility you all have into the future project pipeline. Is that just applications that were mentioned, or do you have much of an assessment or a take on what's coming?
Ross, this is Sheila. Yeah, I don't really have a finger on the pulse of what's coming. The best notification I get is if an agency is going to be working on a large multifamily project. For example, the Yakima Valley Farm Workers is working with Sunnyside Housing Authority on a great big 44-unit retrofit. So they told me about that last year. But I don't really know what the agency planning pipeline is. I'd be happy to find out if that would be useful. Everybody's trying as hard as they can.
We do have the MOUs. I'm not sure if you've seen the MOUs, Ross, but within the MOUs, we've asked the agencies to identify how many homes they think they can serve in the year. So we have that as an estimate of what they think they can accomplish for the year. We do need to look at that in light of what the projection or what the actual accomplishments for the first half of the year are. So kind of comparing the two and see how realistic it is that they'll get the remainder of those estimated projects in by the end of the year. But Sheila, do you remember overall what the
total number of homes?
Yeah.
I'll go look it up, and okay. I'll go find the CAG notes and I'll upload it to the chat.
Okay. Or that can also be kind of a to-do as a follow-up is where are the program accomplishments at right now versus what we were estimating for the year. So that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'll put that together.
Thank you. That's a really good question, Ross. Thank you. Any other thoughts, questions, comments on the low-income weatherization program? Okay, not hearing any. Our next topic is the annual report update. I would like to recommend that we take a 10-minute break, and then we can go into that that annual report update with John. So let's take 13 minutes. That'll give us till 10:30, and I think that gives us enough time to have the remainder of our conversation. And gives everyone kind of a good break. So I will see everyone back at 10:30. Okay, I think it's 10:30. So I'm going to bring us back around to the annual report update. John, are you back on?
Hey, yes, I am. I forgot
right.
they were on my headphones, which weren't back on my head yet. So,
Would you mind giving us an update, please?
absolutely. All right. So the annual report was filed with the commission on June 1st, and it is currently listed on the no action agenda for a commission meeting scheduled Tuesday, July 26th. And after sharing the report with the CAG, we got great feedback. Specifically, we received 7 comments on the report and the associated work papers. There were 7 comments provided, and these are all provided by commission staff. And to address these, we went through, and there was some portions of the report that we did update based on the feedback, and there were some other places where we provided additional information within the feedback tracking that was shared with the CAG. I think it was a couple of days after we filed with the commission. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Is there any questions around the filing of the report, or any follow-up questions anyone had from the report specifically? Right. Well, Monica, I will pass it back to you.
Sounds good. Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we have a brief update for you on the IRP process. So there's the upcoming TAG meeting. It's TAG 4 for, well, I think TAG 3 comes first, doesn't it, Brian? TAG 3 is really quick.
Well, so we had our Washington TAG 3.
That's right.
What was it? Last week or 2 weeks ago. TAG 3 Oregon was moved to later this month, but TAG 4 Washington is August 10th. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So the TAG 4 for Washington is where we're going to be speaking about the energy efficiency chapter for the IRP. As you can see, I listed off the other items here that I believe are going to be included in that TAG discussion. And Brian, I think you just sent a notice yesterday that the time has been extended on that as well, hasn't it? It's a like 9 to 3 meeting, I think.
Yeah, we moved some stuff around in the TAG meetings, and there's going to be a lot of material at TAG 4, so we just thought it was better to extend it. That's correct, 9 to 3.
And, okay. And I think, you know, most of the folks who are interested in it are already on your email list, but if anyone is not and would like an invite, I'm sure that Brian is very happy to forward that along so that you get on that email list as well for those invites. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, yeah, I was just agreeing with you. Yep.
And so I noted, Caleb pulled these up for me, but there's a couple of important dates just to keep in mind. We're going to have the draft IRP will be distributed to Washington, or for Washington on the 24th of November, and then comments from stakeholders are due by January 13th, with that final filing date February 24th. Obviously, we'll be working on our narrative, our chapter before that, and our chapter, most of that work will be in September, early September, late August, after we have our advisory group, our technical advisory group discussion next month. So that kind of gives you an idea on the timeline. Right now, we are actually, Caleb is working with Applied Energy Group, our vendor, to rerun our load map model. We are updating the avoided costs to align with the avoided costs for this most recent IRP. The forecast horizon is actually going to be 2023 through 2050, so it's more than a 20-year horizon. And I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong in the way that I state this, Brian, but the intention is to make sure that we're forecasting out to those 2050 dates where we've got some of the decarbonization legislation and everything that we need to keep in mind. So we really want to make sure that the forecast reaches out to that timeline as well. Did I kind of phrase that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you. One thing to keep in mind is we did, as I mentioned, we are updating those avoided costs as well as I believe the baseline forecast for that. So this run will not align exactly with our biennial conservation plan. So the IRP will come out with, you know, some numbers, and those are not going to be the actual goals that we have on our BCP. They will be a little different because the inputs will have changed. So we just wanted to kind of state that. If anyone has any questions, happy to address those. We are, you know, having conversations with the commission staff on what those differences are, the difference between the targets from the IRP versus the goals that we've actually set already in our biennial conservation plan. And then there's conversations on the back end as well on how we can perhaps update our timing so that our CPA will occur within the time frame where we can actually have it be new enough and using the new avoided costs from the IRP to feed into the BCP itself. So I know I'm throwing acronyms out, I apologize. We all know BCP is Biennial Conservation Plan, IRP, Integrated Resources Plan. So it's just looking at where the timeline hits and where each of these deliverables needs to occur. We already had it established based on the last conservation potential assessment and the requirements from HB 1257. Having said that, our conservation potential assessment timing was a little bit off from what the electrics typically do. And so we didn't quite hit the same timeline that they did, which means that we're having to rerun some of those numbers now. Whereas ideally we would have just plugged and played our CPA without having to rerun the avoided costs. So I know I'm throwing a lot out there, but essentially I guess my point is that we're going to evaluate that timing and look at ways for us to move the timing on that CPA a little bit so that we're still meeting all of our obligations, and so that that CPA will actually be able to plug directly into our IRPs moving forward versus having to rerun numbers and then potentially having both an IRP target and a BCP goal and having them be different. So just a little bit of background on what that looks like. I'm happy to answer any questions from the advisory group if you have any. And I obviously welcome you to attend that August 10th meeting where we'll have the slides on what the new runs from our conservation potential, from our model, our load map model look like based on the new avoided costs. In addition to the scenarios that we have noted to address like what local gas bans, how that can affect our potential, and the increasingly stringent energy codes that may not already be captured in the CPAs. So I know I just talked a lot. Are there any questions from anyone on the advisory group here? Caleb or Brian, any additional thoughts or comments on the IRP update before we move on?
I think it's a good summary, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think you hit all the main topics on that.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to move on to our strategic energy management conversation. Brady, would you like to take it from here?
Surely. So strategic energy management is something that we have discussed for some time, and through the most recent CPA, we had some notes of expectations or belief that there was some opportunity in the market specifically for the commercial program on SEM. So I'll kind of go through this presentation, but happy to take questions at any time, and just kind of give you an overview of where we are right now and where we plan to move forward. So next slide. So essentially, strategic energy management, or SEM, the goal is to identify opportunities for savings, as we discussed through the most recent CPA. Those savings are typically achieved through operations and maintenance improvements and behavioral actions for customers, and specifically to prioritize energy projects for some of our larger users. This does present, however, some challenges, and so we tried to find a creative solution to address some of these challenges. So on the challenges front, we identified transport customers. SEM essentially are a bunch of really small actions. This is the traditional SEM program, a bunch of small actions by large users that have a decent impact on savings and opportunities. Do you mind moving to the next slide, Monica? Sorry. Monica,
did it move forward?
It did not, at least not on my end.
Thanks. I did click it forward.
Okay.
I can stop presenting and restart if that helps. Bear with me here.
Yeah, and I don't mind talking through it, but as you're reloading it, transport customers are a particular challenge. As you know, transport customers do not generally or are not eligible for incentives through the incentive program. And because the largest users, Cascade Natural Gas users or participants within CNG territory are typically transport customers, it presents a real challenge for a potential SEM program. It does look like, yes, it is showing. Monica, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
There's also a cost associated, because generally SEM programs are larger programs that are standalone and offer, have coaches that do cohorts, meetings with an energy champion for each company. So generally you're going to have a cohort of 5 or 6, maybe sometimes as many as 10 businesses represented in a cohort, and it's training, educational materials, technical documents on, again, these smaller changes that can have decent impacts on savings. The other challenge for a gas-only utility is that the majority of SEM programs are with electric utilities or dual fuel. So where we don't have that opportunity on the Cascade side of having dual fuel, it's a particular challenge because about 75 or 80% of the savings come from kWh savings. So you think about lighting and turn down setting sensors and things like that. There's not that kind of low-hanging fruit opportunity on the gas side. You guys have any questions on the challenges specifically? Because I do see a really cool couple of opportunities, but I wanted to see if there were any questions on the challenges before we move to that. All right. So next slide.
Brady, can I add just one thing?
Yes.
And I know you've already stated this, but I'm just going to kind of reiterate. The conservation potential assessment identified savings associated with SEM for our programs. So that really is one of the main impetus behind us looking into specifically SEM. So as Brady said, he's going to get into some of the opportunities now, so I won't go too far in depth in that. But I really tasked Brady with going back and reviewing from both a regional and a national level what opportunities are really out there for our SEM, strategic energy management approach, so that we can capture some of those savings that are identified in the conservation potential assessment by AEG. So I'll stop there, but thank you, Brady, and I'll move forward.
Yeah, thank you for reiterating that. It was something that we kind of brought to their attention as something we were going to explore. And once we did, they said, oh yeah, there actually might be some opportunity here. So I think to address that, there's kind of three areas where gas utilities or dual fuel utilities capture savings through SEM, and that's through condensing boilers and controls and systems upgrades, or in this case called retro commissioning. With the new deemed therm savings that are achieved through condensing boilers, a lot of the set points and turndowns that are come standard now with high efficiency condensing boilers, we're already capturing. So the majority of the savings that would traditionally come from an SEM program, we are now already capturing on these boilers that go in based on the new tariffs that went into place April 1st. So I would say that's the lowest hanging fruit of the three, and we're already capturing that. So we don't consider that to be a part of a potential SEM program. We consider that to be a part of our standard program at this point. The other two areas are HVAC controls and retro commissioning. HVAC controls are also available through our standard program through the demand control ventilation, and those are something that we build into. We do a lot of projects with larger users on trying to take rooftop units, for example, that currently are functional but are not operating at an optimal condition. And so what the adding the demand control ventilation helps save. So we're already offering that through our standard program, but we also offer it through custom incentives. So specifically with custom incentives were things like makeup air units, kitchen hoods for controls for kitchen hoods in restaurants. While we are working on a potential standard incentive for those, currently we only offer those through custom. So we have already, I would say, captured a fair bit of the market on HVAC controls. And then the third area is retro commissioning, or kind of what you would consider to be a tune-up for your equipment. This can come through a couple of different avenues. One is like replacing, a good example might be a boiler. Instead of replacing a whole boiler with a brand new boiler, upgrading the burner. So taking the component pieces that are functioning at less than efficient levels and upgrading those to much more efficient levels. We also, with this, though there's no standard incentive, we currently can offer savings through our custom program on this, and do quite regularly. In fact, we have a school district that is kind of weighing the choice right now. Are they going to just upgrade their boiler component pieces and make it run more efficiently and all of that, in which we will offer them a custom incentive, or are they going to replace the boiler and go with a high efficiency boiler? So these questions do come up. I wouldn't say regularly, but enough that it was worth us calling it out as part of our goal to address SEM specifically for us as a gas-only utility. And then the third and final area, which is something that I know commission staff and the program in general have really looked at, is how we can collaborate with other utilities. So where we are the gas provider and there's an electric utility that provides the electric, what kind of work are they doing from an SEM program, and how can we assist? I've preliminarily had conversations with PSE and Pacific Power and have had really good feedback from them on either one, being a participant in their current SEM programs or cohorts and looking at how they can save on the gas side, or two, just sharing our information so that they can encourage their customers to reach out to us on the gas side. This has been, something that we've worked on. I don't know. I think I'm going back at least a year and 3 months, maybe 15 months or so, from the time I first had these conversations with, started with PSE and has moved on to Pacific Power, as they're probably our two largest electric utilities where we share customers, and it's again been nothing but positive feedback. Now, are they willing to, have us make a full presentation, where they may be looking at customers, they're focused on KWH and, their focus on the SM program. I wouldn't say that I've gotten that feedback yet, but I'm certainly more than willing to talk and push in that direction based on the feedback that we received today and the feedback that we've had thus far. So again, working collaboratively with the other utilities to join in and share savings for our shared customers to save therms in addition to the KWH. Any questions on that, specifically on the opportunity side? Great.
Hey, Brady, this is Mark Thompson, Forefront Economics. Just to add a couple of points that I'm glad to see the focus here on SEM. I think there are typically a lot of opportunities, and it's really unique, as you know, and you've been doing this a while. It's unique in the sense that it's this blend between hard measures that we're all used to in energy efficiency and a sort of I guess, for lack of a better term, behavioral, or the things that you point out, like set points down and even changes in plant operations that are subtle. And these are often achieved by a mindset that is developed at the business when there is a focus on energy management and strategic energy management on a continual basis. And so it's good to see. And the Pacific Northwest has a long history in this, as you know. I'm sure not everyone on the call may be familiar with it, but the Pacific Northwest has a long history in strategic energy management and has really helped to lay the groundwork for a lot of this. Great to see also the partnering aspect. I have, it's rare to see when there's only one fuel savings in a strategic energy management type of application. Generally touches on multiple fuels, even though it may be led by, say, an electric. There are typically some other fuel savings. And so the partnering, I think, is really wise. Good to see it. Thanks for the update on that.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. You're right with the history, and that's one of the things that, because it is, I talked to Avista Gas, for example, and they're kind of piloting some SEM-like programs, but there's nothing specific that I've come across yet where it's, a gas-only utility that wants to do SEM. So one of the cool things is partnering, and this is kind of part of the conclusion, is finding those energy champions within the organizations. I can think of a handful of examples where, we do a project somewhere and the energy champion then immediately is working with the administration of the business to, okay, so let's reinvest all of these dollars we just saved into something else that's going to save us energy, and let's just keep building on that. And so getting those energy champions programmed into what we're doing and what we're offering is huge, and we've been doing that for a long time. But these are all things, again, and that's kind of what I'm reiterating. And in conclusion, if you want to go to the next slide, we're not reinventing the wheel or creating anything new on this. I think what we're largely doing is taking advantage of the opportunities that currently exist. And while it may not be called out as SEM per se on, our savings goals or things like that, we're open to having those conversations. Monica mentioned the partnership with Western Washington University, and I've been working with them as well as some other folks from CNG to, look at what kind of behavioral changes on residential halls can we encourage students to not leave their windows open all day, those kinds of things, where the heat's just constantly kicking on, and those kinds of things. Those are kind of that Mark talked about, the behavioral things that you can't exactly capture in, an incentive, but we're open to those opportunities, and we're going to continue to push forward with these partnerships with other utilities and push forward with the current incentives that we offer both on the standard and custom side. So any questions? I think that concludes everything I wanted to discuss, but any specific questions or anything come up? Great. Thank you all.
Thank you, Brady. I really appreciate you talking to that SEM point and our next step. All right, so we have our 2022 builder program trends. John, would you like to take over from here?
Absolutely. Thank you, Monica. All right. So covering builder trends, we are, the program is seeing that in 2022, builder participation is down versus previous years. We did expect this decrease, and currently we are working on solutions to increase builder participation. The reason that we expected this decrease was a 2021 survey, which we did with our builders, getting responses from roughly 50% of the builder cohort. And from that survey, we found that there could be a drop-off of up to 85% for gas, furnace, and tankless water heater rebate applications in new homes. There was a NEA postcode study that did go on to corroborate the findings of our survey. I think I'd have to look at the numbers once again because the study is now officially published. I believe we had preliminary findings previously, but it indicates a large shift towards using electric as the primary fuel for space heating and for water heating. And they also performed a survey with builders that followed the same trend of a lot of builders are switching over to electric for the space and water heat. So next slide, please. If we look at our trend in the first half of the year, what we'll see is that in 2 of the climate zones in our service territory, the applications have been on a bit of a downward trend. And I don't know if there's the next slide up yet, but currently we're on the title slide. Thank you. Okay. So here we have.
It does show, right?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So what we see here is our builder applications in the first half of the year from 2017 to 2022, and it's broken up by climate zone. So what we can see here is a few things. Climate Zone 3, which is our service territory on the east side of Washington, typically contributes the most towards the builder program. And there has been a drastic decrease in participation in the first half of this year compared to the previous 4 years. It's been on a bit of a downward trend. We do anticipate some of this was due to COVID, which did hold up building for a bit at the beginning of the pandemic. Beyond that, builders have had some turnover in their offices, and typically when that happens, if their employee handling the rebate applications moved on, there's not a great handoff, and so sometimes that requires additional training to get them back up to speed. But you'll see that the overall trend is going down. Climate Zone 2, a bit of an anomaly there. I would say that that's due to working with a builder there specifically to help them move forward. That being said, they could also be going the same way. I think they were a bit behind. So we might be seeing that 82 here in the first half of the year is the last homes that they had under the previous permits. So based on this, if you can go to the next slide, please. We are projecting that the total application intake for builders this year is going to be 440 across all 3 climate zones. And that is down, if if it does hold to 440, that would be down 32% versus 2021's total applications received, which was 649. So this right here contains the full year application intake for 2017 through 2021, and 2022 is a projection. So we do see climate zone 2 again having that big bump. The projection was based off of historically how many applications were received in the first half of the year and in the second half of the year. So I really just used that same trend to project where each climate zone would be. So that's why we're seeing that large bump in climate zone 2. That'd be great if that did hold to that, but we'll just have to wait and see. So overall, the trend is going downwards. And so Cascade has been working on some ideas to just make sure that we are still going out and getting the savings that are in the new home segment. You know, we know that there are still builders out there building with gas, and so we want to make sure that we are reaching out to them. So currently we don't have a defined plan, but we do, it kind of like the Ishikawa chart that Monica showed earlier, for which we were looking at the total program, trying to increase participation. We had a bit of the same work going on with the builder program. And so we're going to be taking those ideas and just sifting out till we find some that we think can really drive the participation. And one thing that I think that we really will need to focus on is a whole home approach. If you do look at the NIA study, a lot of builders said that they, instead of changing building practices, really just they switched the equipment that they use in a new home. And so that doesn't necessarily address a whole home approach, right? If we're just switching the equipment used to heat, we're not actually improving the envelope. And so I think a huge portion of the savings out there is going to be tied to improving the envelope. Something that, you know, we might look at is something like aero barrier as a potential rebate in the future, which is a product that is an aerosolized sealant that can be used to improve the tightness of envelopes. But that will need some additional pre-work before we're able to develop a pilot for that. So we'll just have to continue looking into it. But yes, so this is the trend that we're currently seeing is that, yeah, go ahead, Monica.
I'm sorry, I was just going to note that that's one of the pilots that we noted in our biennial conservation plan. So that's on our radar to implement in this biennium.
Yes, thank you. So, and yeah, we will be working towards that. Avista actually is wrapping up their pilot program, and I spoke with Leona Haley over there, and she has a lot of great feedback that we'll be able to use when developing our pilot. So very excited to continue working on that. And again, you know, some other options would be looking at increased, you know, we offer a increased bonus bundle, if you will, not a bonus, but a bundle. If you take a more holistic approach to the home, installing some measures that we see aren't very highly efficient, such as fireplaces. Fireplaces are typically not a very efficient piece of equipment that goes into new homes. And so we're bundling, if, you know, you can get a handful of new measures all together, including a fireplace or a smart thermostat, then there's some increased rebate amount there. So yeah, that's the approach that we're looking at taking. And we did anticipate this trend, but we know that the savings are out there, so we are still diligently working towards gathering those. Just wanted to open it up now for any questions about what we're seeing in the program or what we're doing to address it.
John, this is Sheila. There's a question in the chat about asking you to repeat the pilot. So I tried to help, but you may want to say something.
Oh, thank you. Yes, so the pilot specifically would be for a new rebate offering. The product is called Aero Barrier. Aero Seal is another version of this that's used to seal ducts. But the pilot would be offering a rebate for Aero Barrier in new homes. And this measure is able to really increase the tightness of the envelope. So what Avista was seeing, so code is 5 air changes per hour. That's fairly tight, but you can get a lot tighter than that. So what they were seeing was air changes per hour below 1, which means that you're really having a lot less infiltration, which means there's less exterior air entering the home that needs to then be heated. That would then just be forced out, right? That's infiltration. We don't want that infiltration. So what we're looking at is a rebate to support using Aero Barrier to make homes tighter. And if we can do that, then again, that's something that really improves the shell, and it's potentially cost saving in the long run, but there is some concern from builders about what it takes to switch over to that product. Hopefully, I don't know, Heather, if that answered the question, but
I think there's a to-do in the chat as well, John, to follow up in our next ESR meeting on Aero Barrier. So the ESRs are for it. Thank you.
I'll make sure to, I'll have something prepared for that.
John, this is Sheila.
Yes.
Do you have any kind of a rough incremental cost on the Aero Barrier? Or is it all based on, the volume of the home, or is there a square
that
foot
is
price?
a great question. So currently, I do not have an incremental cost.
Or just the cost overall?
Yes.
Like a range?
So
I don't know, $5,000 to $10,000.
it looks
I
like
have no.
the range was $2,000 to $3,000 for the full install cost. And pretty much what that looks like is setting up it's like a spray gun that sprays aerosolized sealant into the air. And then there's a blower door that goes onto the front door. You seal up every other door and any holes that you don't want the sealant to get into. And then it forces, it pressurizes the home, which forces that sealant in. So that's what
Yes, they have videos.
cost
They're
looks
awesome.
like.
The videos
It is.
are really cool.
It's it'll find and Phil, I believe it's any hole the size of a quarter in the home. So it really takes a lot of the guesswork out of finding all of those areas. And then the way that Avista had structured their rebate was based on the difference between the number of air changes per hour between the code minimum, so 5 air changes per hour, and what you're able to come in at. So if you come in at 3 air changes per hour, you get 2 air changes per hour, right? Times $150 for each air change. Then multiplied by the square footage divided by 1,000 to account for the fact that there is a scaling factor there. If you have a larger home, it's going to cost more. So that's how it's structured. I'm not exactly sure, how we will offer ours. I'm imagining it might be along the same lines, but yeah, that's kind of how that rebate would be structured. Ted, go ahead.
What did you say the cost was again? Sorry.
Total cost is $2,000 to $3,000.
Yeah, and Ted, it happens before the sheet, after the wiring, before the insulation, before the sheetrock. It's
no, I'm familiar with the process. I've
cool.
seen videos and stuff. I'm very familiar with it. I just wanted to look at the price versus the point system, because then I just want to see if it'll even make sense.
Oh, right.
My own numbers.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point, because there is additional credits based on envelope tightness. So that's a good point. So any other questions regarding the pilot or the trend that we're seeing in builder applications and what we're doing to address that. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Monica, I'll pass it back to you.
That's great. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right. So we're going to move on to our third party EM&V discussion, and Caleb is going to lead this part of our meeting. Caleb?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Caleb Reimer. I joined Cascade in the spring as an economic analyst. So just a couple of slides here to update that third-party measure level EM&V process. As an overview, it's really from our last biennial conservation plan that Monica talked about a little bit earlier in this meeting here. So as we're going through, and Monica, feel free to go to the next slide. As we're going through individuals on the phone, please feel free to ask any questions as they arise. We'll get that information over to you. So I think first, we'd just like to specify what is EM&V in that overview. It's evaluation, measurement, and verification. And how I think about it, it's the review of the validity of energy savings for our ratepayers. So internally, we separate EM&V into a couple of different types. The chart in the bottom there has two of them listed, one being EM&V with a lowercase and then with an uppercase E in the EM&V. The lowercase, it's the internal program that we have running in perpetuity. Really, it originated as a cost-effective, less robust measure for internal evaluation based on our third-party software that we use on a daily basis. It's really intended to bridge the gap between the larger scale EM&V that we have on the right, which is conducted on the third party, also perpetually, but more so on a 4-year cycle. That EM&V with the capital E is intended to be more robust, with that measure level review and data gathering on a cycle that we actually have outlined on our next slide. The internal, it really focuses on those items that we have quantitative data on that we can do some analysis with. Specifically, furnaces for the seasonal load and tankless water heaters for the base load. Keep in mind the lowercase EM&V as well as that measure level third party EM&V. That's in addition to the biennial program EM&V, which will be started about a year from now, actually, in quarter 3 of 2023, and then completed in quarter 2 of 2024. We can head to the next slide here. Sorry, just waiting for it to flip over on my screen.
Is it there now?
Not quite. Anyways, I'm sure it'll pop up here in a second. So the first topic, looking at just an industry EM&V review, that was the first step in our process for us, really to get a baseline of knowledge education. And it was procedures and standards that focus more so on regional, things in the Pacific Northwest and California, but we also reviewed some national programs. It really seemed like the Northeast was a highlight for them, Delaware, New York, and especially Massachusetts. Besides that, there it is. Besides that, we also reviewed the National Survey of State Policies and Practices for Energy Efficiency Program Evaluation. Seemed to be almost like just a major handbook of everything to do and also things not to do for us. And that's from the ACEEE, the American Council for Energy Efficiency. Next, we looked at our internal program review. I would summarize that with the question that we asked ourselves of what EM&V process will provide the most value to our ratepayers. And really, that means, what areas that we can look at. And when I say we, it's really going to be that third party. What could they look at to gather more data and provide additional information that'll then help the ratepayers out? Along with that, it's also what can be streamlined with that internal lowercase EM&V that we are doing in perpetuity. What can be streamlined and combined with that? So then we have our cadence proposal. As I mentioned, we're looking at a 4-year cycle for that third party measure level EM&V. Our current outline is looking at commercial programs in year 1. Those are things like the heating and food service, things like griddles and ovens, and perhaps even rebates that were phased out in the past, like fryers. Perhaps there's a possibility of bringing something back if it turned out to be the right move. Weatherization for windows and insulation, you'll see that across the 4 years, being those envelope measures, and then even customized offerings as well as included in there. Year 2 and year 3, we're looking more so on the residential side, with the first of those 2 years focusing on residential space, water heating, and appliance measures. One of our thought processes is this is something that we do review fairly frequently in-house. However, it does constitute right around 55% of the total therms for our program, so we do think it's of great value. Once again, it includes like furnaces, thermostats, fireplaces, boilers, most of those items that we see pretty frequently in our rebate software. Year 3, We're planning on focusing on those envelope measures for residential, windows, attic, and ceiling insulation, which that's something I'm personally thinking will be a great topic to look at, especially with some of the quite lucrative rebates that we've introduced recently. With a couple of years of data, we could see some really nice trends and pathways for that third-party company to, once again, find some great opportunities for our ratepayers to get extra value from. Year 4 will be that final of the 4 years in the cycle before repeating. That's going to be the industrial program. What we often see is industrial is going to be a little more customized with miscellaneous projects. We're thinking it might be a little less data rich initially. So a couple more years to build up and get the customized items in there could help out that third party. Moving on to the RFP disbursement list, and this might look familiar to those individuals on the call. Really, it's the goal is to be as robust as a list as possible. It's in progress. We've currently got right around a dozen or so firms who have responded to us for this list. The individuals that was sent to, it's based on previous work with the CNGC and MDU group. It was also based off of that. There was quite a few nice firms that were listed that we include as well. Monica, you got your hand raised?
Yeah, Caleb, I'm not sure if we mentioned it, but if people have questions, comments, do you want them to speak to it as you're presenting, or kind of hold until the end of your part of the presentation? Because we're really looking for feedback on this RFP process.
Absolutely, you are spot on. The feedback would be fantastic for us, and that is also a reason why we will be sending out this RFP draft to those individuals on the call right after this, I should say by the end of the day today. But to answer that question, yes, if there's any feedback or questions, we'd love to hear them as they arise, rather than at the end of this segment.
Thanks, Caleb.
Yeah. Thank you. To close that out, of course, there's from the research, and then also industry contacts like the Energy Trust of Oregon, some of our call it sister companies in the area, Vista, Northwest Natural. They've also been assisting us in building up this list. I believe on the 29th of June, the individuals from the CAG on this call have received an email with that list. And of course, if there are any additional firms or contacts that we should reach out to or consider including on this disbursement, please do let us know. Our current request is 7 days from now on the 20th of July to hear back both on that RFP draft, which I'll mention here in a second, as well as if there's any contacts that perhaps you recommend we reach out to. Next up, we can see the timeline on the screen. That's going to be that chart at the bottom. I'll just briefly read through some of the line items here, of course, starting with today for that draft RFP, which you will receive by email by the end of the day. That'll be coming from Des on our team. We also have on this line item, I'll mention here in a second, that draft RFP feedback. So as we mentioned, that'll be coming your way shortly. Our request is we want to make this process in this RFP as concise but informative as possible. So within your expertise and knowledge, you have any feedback for us, any items, it is your optional choice to please respond to us, provide any feedback that you may have that we can then incorporate into that final draft, which we then plan on sending on the 22nd. Now, keep in mind, we do recognize it's a pretty tight turnaround, so feel free, anyone on the call, to speak up. If you do plan on reviewing that RFP and sending some suggestions back, is 1 week enough time? Would you suggest a little bit of an adjustment to that time frame for you to have more adequate time to respond? If anyone has any feedback on the call right now, perhaps you bring it up. And feel free to pop in here in a little bit if you choose. Moving on, looking at right around the end of this month, getting some intent to respond forms back from those firms so we know perhaps who we're dealing with, who our options are, and also to make sure that we did get the list out to the appropriate amount of firms. In September, that's when I call the meat of the process will really be going down for us, where we're hoping to receive those proposals back, select some finalists, do some interviews, and then kick off the process right around the end of September. Are there any questions on the call from anyone?
So, Caleb, do you mind if I set a little bit of a historic baseline for Cascade on EM&E?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So our programs have not had when I say programs, I'm referring to the residential, commercial, industrial side, specifically, not as much on the low-income side, because that's had a separate evaluation. Residential, commercial, industrial, we haven't had a lot of third-party EM&D done. We did have a portion of our programs evaluated as part of our original conservation potential assessment that was performed by Nexent when we had the TPOT model. So I think that was back in 2016, 2017, I want to say. And we did, they reviewed furnaces and a couple of the other residential measures at that point, and came back with some recommendations for improvement on our program based on that evaluation. So this is us both following up on the biennial conservation plan requirements to perform EM&D, and then a precursor to, as Caleb mentioned, the end of cycle full program EM&D that we'll be engaging in as part of those conditions requirements as well from the BCP. So we're excited to see where it goes. We would really appreciate, as Caleb mentioned, feedback from our advisory group if you're able to, because we are not as familiar with third-party EM&D. What are some best practices that we can follow? Caleb spent a lot of time digging into some of the other RFPs that have been sent out, talking to some of our, as you said, sister companies just in the industry regionally. What have you encountered? What have you asked about? What would you recommend that we look at for this? So again, we're really looking towards our advisory group members, if you're able to give us some feedback, give us some recommendations. We want this to be as useful as possible to both our programs, obviously the commission, and then really make sure that the ratepayers are getting the value out of this effort. It is, going to be additional costs. It's administrative costs, and we do budget it in, of course. But we want it to be useful in informing our programs moving forward on how to improve, how to make sure that we're actually getting the savings that we're estimating. So Caleb, what's our action right now? What's our next step that we're looking for from our advisory group members here?
Yeah, the action item, I'll call it the two-part. It's both in the same day. We're looking at that the 20th of July, assuming that timeline seems fair to those on the call. Number one is if you have any of those firms that do conduct this third-party measure level EM&D, please let us know. And if you have their contact information, we'd love to include that. Otherwise, we'll reach out to them directly. And then the second half of that, once again, you will receive via email from Des later today that copy of our draft RFP. Please, if your time allows, we'd love you to review it, go through. We have on there what our outline is and what our plan is. And if you've got any feedback for us for improvement, we'd love to incorporate it. This will be one of the main things we're dedicating time to on my side over the next week and a half before we send it out. So I'd love to make sure it's as solid and as strong as possible.
I wonder, Caleb, if we could get maybe a virtual hands raised of members here who think that they would be able to provide some feedback in the next week on that proposal versus those who think that they would perhaps still want to provide us that feedback but need an extra week. I think that's one of our main questions right now is if you simply don't have the time to review it, then we're going to move forward with it within the week. If you feel like that extra week would be helpful and you really would be able to give us some feedback, we would love that too. As John had mentioned, we got one response back from our annual report, and one respondent, I should say, and valuable feedback. We absolutely incorporated it. I want to make sure that we are giving our advisory group members as much opportunity to weigh in as possible, and this really is something that we could use that expertise if you're able to. So I guess maybe for show of hands, do you think that we can get some feedback within a week, or do you need that extra week, and will that help us get additional feedback, or is that not even going to be enough? In which case we'll just move forward. So I think that's kind of maybe it's not fair, but that's my request right now. So anyone think they can?
So I was just going to ask, should we raise our hands if 1 week is okay, or if an extra week would be helpful?
Well, I guess that's two questions, right? Corey, if we extend it out to 2 weeks, is that are we still gonna get some feedback? Will that help us get additional feedback? So we're absolutely willing to do that. If members don't think that that's even enough, then we're just gonna send it after a week, because we can't.
An extra week would be helpful.
So, okay. And definitely would get.
Yeah, I'd try to provide feedback to the extent I can. Just resource constraints here. Personally, I'm focused on the Avista GRC stuff, so got a bunch of balls in the air right now.
Absolutely understand. If we extend it out to 2 weeks, can I get maybe some raised hands on who thinks that they would actually be able to provide us some feedback on that EM&V RFP. Evaluation, measurement, and verification request for proposal. Should be that. And just to give you some context, it's about a 10-page document. Okay, I'm seeing one raised hand, which is actually not that encouraging. Fully appreciate Corey. I'm more than willing for us to push it out if we can get some feedback from public council. That's really valuable. I know everybody's resource constrained, so I guess we'll take what assistance we can get. Would ask if you're available, please take a look at it, because we really do need that feedback. I think that's what helps improve our programs, and that's the value of an EM&V, right? It's really looking at not just taking Cascade's word for it necessarily, but trying to pull the additional insights in to improve our programs and our approach to our programs. So I think, Caleb, let's go ahead and push it out a week if that'll help. And then I would encourage and ask if anyone can please take a look at it in the next 2 weeks. We could really use any recommendations you have.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Caleb. Any additional comments, questions on our EM&V approach? I'm not hearing any, so I think we'll probably be done here pretty quick then. The last item I have on the agenda for today. I'm sorry, Caleb, did you have anything else you wanted to add at the end here? I apologize. Okay. Nothing further to add, Caleb?
No, nothing on my end. Sorry, I had a network drop real quick.
Okay. Okay. Technology today. All right, thank you so much. That was a great presentation, Caleb. I'm excited to see as we move forward with the EM&V, and really appreciate that you just kind of took it right away and just ran with it. So we'll get that up and running then. So the last item on the agenda is just our wrap up, and then looking at that quarterly meeting for our final quarter of the year. Right now, the date is set for October 5th. We're hoping that will be both in person in Bellingham and via Teams. We'll have the new, it's called a rally bar. So we'll have our rally bar up and running. So hopefully those who are not able to attend in person will have visibility through the technology as well as the audio through Teams. So we'll follow up to make sure that COVID trends are still conducive to an in-person meeting, but that's definitely our intention for October. And then as far as wrap up, I don't have anything further for the meeting. Are there any closing questions, comments, or to-do? Okay. So I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it there then. Thank you so much for joining, and thanks for your patience today. And I look forward to the next time we get to chat. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,